It's a park that is not actually a park. Despite the dog walkers, sunbathers, public garbage cans, and tree-lined trail, the park on Haltane Avenue north of the Royal Jubilee Hospital is actually just a vacant lot. The Saanich property is owned by BC Hydro, but people in the neighbourhood have been treating it as parkland for decades. Now, according to residents nearby, the park could soon change hands, and they're worried about losing the green space as a result. They've even launched a petition calling to save the green space, which they've dubbed Kings Park on their Facebook page. Khalil Acktar took a walk on the property last week with Adam Kreek and Rebecca Sterritt, who own a house across the street.
It's a vacant lot officially. It's a BC Hydro property, but it feels like we're standing looking at an owl in a tree.
And there's a falcon just flying overhead.
Feels like we're in parkland.
Oh, it totally feels like parkland. It's a rare space this close to the city, so this close to the urban core. It's a place that's not manicured. It's wild. Like we've got these owls, these falcons, ducks, birds. There's a lot of critters that live here and thrive here, and it's a great natural escape for the neighborhood.
So there's a feeling in the neighborhood that this piece of land is going to disappear at some point, or may disappear. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. There is a house on the property, one remaining house that BC Hydro had leased for 27 years, I believe. Hydro's owned the property for 68, and our community has used it as a green space for 68 years. And the tenants of that property were evicted in January, and they were given the reason that BC Hydro was going to be selling the property, and there could be no houses on the property when they made that sale.
Okay, so officially not for sale right now, but the sense you have from talking to people in the neighborhood is that it's imminent.
Well, and through, yes, our understanding is that BC Hydro is going through a process right now offering it as they legally have to Crown corporations and to First Nations. And once that process has completed, which our understanding is within days, they'll be speaking to Saanich about the possibility of acquiring this space.
Yeah, so we've mounted a campaign, and we're rallying the community together, and council is very pro-development, and our worry is that they will develop this green space. We want to keep this green space for our community for all the future. And we realize that there is a housing crisis, but our opinion is that we should infill existing development and save green space. So there's just was a development on the corner here where 2 houses got turned into 16 houses. This seems to be the vision of Saanich Council. Let's cram more people, more houses, more families in here, which makes sense from a urban planning standpoint. But it also makes sense from an urban planning standpoint to preserve green space, to preserve wild space, and especially if you let's just bring in the mental health crisis that exists. As we become more urban and more densified, there's more and more negative mental health effects, and it's really well documented that access to nature helps us stay calm and helps us recalibrate for the grind of city life. We need to save this green space.
So the two of you live across the street from this park. You've got kids. You routinely come here. Give me a snapshot of the users of this park and the kinds of activity you see here.
Well, the neat thing about this space is it's used by a diverse group of people. So you have, first off, the commuters. There's a lot of people that take the bus down Richmond Road and then walk down the beautiful treed path to the hospital or through on their way to work downtown. There are so many kids that use this park. There are swings that have been put up in the trees. There's people that play baseball, that play soccer. There's naturalists that come through the park. As we're standing beside an owl and a hawk just flew overhead, there are, of course, people that walk their dogs from all 3 communities. It's worth noting, from Victoria, Saanich, and Oak Bay that come to use the space. There's meditation circles that come here. There's people from the hospital have their lunch breaks here. The mental health unit sometimes brings their patients through here. It has for 68 years been used by our community as a park. And as you said in the introduction, people assume this is a park.
Yeah, I keep calling it a park.
We call it a park.
You call it a park.
We're calling it Kings Park.
Yeah, I mean, there's a parking lot over there. I mean, it's got parking that seems dedicated to it. I've biked by it many times over the years, and I always assumed it was a park, but technically speaking, on paper, It's not.
It's a BC Hydro-owned property. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that BC Hydro is a Crown corporation. This is a different scenario than it would be if it were a private corporation selling a piece of land. This is a public piece of land that we're asking to be acquired by a public municipality. And so I think there's a lot of options in terms of funding when we think about it from that perspective.
So I ran this by a couple of Saanich councillors, and they said, well, it's not for sale. We don't have any comment. I mean, it's not we don't have anything to say. I mean, what's your take? What have you heard from Saanich Council who you think should ultimately acquire it as parkland?
I would just say that my understanding is that Saanich is not able to discuss this currently, and that's fine, right? You know, our governments have their processes they need to go through. The message that our whole community is trying to make sure that Saanich, the CRD, and the province hears is that, you know, we're open to working together to save this space. We don't feel like the discussion has to be housing or green space. I think there's creative ways that we can work together to acquire this land, and we don't need to rush directly behind the scenes, behind closed doors and discussions to pave the largest remaining green space on the south, peninsula.
Sorry, the largest remaining green space?
It's a 5-acre piece of green space, and it's the largest piece of green space remaining in the south of Saanich, Victoria, whatever you want to call this region of land.
Sorry, Beacon Hill Park?
No, unprotected.
Unprotected. Okay,
Yes,
gotcha.
yeah.
So some might say that, look, there are other parks. Yes, this one happens to be across the street from your house, but there are other parks, close by.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Khalil. So there are other parks close by. There's a children's park, Allenby Park, that's a manicured green space. And I'd say two things. First, this is very different from most other community parks in the region. It's a natural space, which is very different than a soccer field and a tennis court. And also, though, in doing some research, we found that in our local Shelburne area plan, which is where the park falls into, our local area is at a deficit of parkland based on Saanich policy guidelines. We, as of the early 2000s, were about, I believe, 2 hectares short, and that was based on 1990 population levels. And since our population has increased 25%, so we're at a real significant deficit of park for what our population should have in this area.
And our population's slated to grow. So as the population grows, it becomes even that much more important to put green space aside and save it for the health and well-being of all the people in the Shelburne area.
Sure, even if it's all high rises.
Yes.
All around it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Even more so if it's all high rises, then we need space to be, and as Adam mentioned, mental health. But
we've got a giant apartment complex right beside here, and half the people in the park we see regularly, they live in this apartment complex, and they come here because it's their escape. And so as more and more apartment complexes, the whole Richmond's slated to be redeveloped into multi-family, multi-unit housing. So we are going to be densifying. So let's densify and let's save the green space so that people have a space to escape the concrete.
That was Adam Kreek and Rebecca Sterritt speaking to Khalil Acktar. They live near a vacant property north of the Royal Jubilee Hospital, and they and their neighbours worry the land will soon be sold by the owners, BC Hydro. We asked several Saanich municipal councillors to talk about the municipality possibly buying the land as parkland, but they declined to comment because the property isn't officially on the market right now, and we asked BC Hydro, the owners of the property, about whether it will be coming up for sale. We'll let you know when we have more details. It's 21 minutes after 7 now. This is On the Island.